This is Weights and Wealth, your one-stop shop for entertaining education on building a stronger body and bank account.
We are not doctors or financial advisors and must warn you this is not medical or investing advice. It is for your entertainment. Welcome back to another episode of Weights and Wealth. Today's episode is going to be on how you are being robbed of your micronutrients and spending power.
I'm going to talk about soil. So get ready.
Is this going to be like a micronutrient episode part two?
Okay. We're not doing a full micronutrient episode. We're doing a half micronutrient episode.
Okay. But this week's shout out goes to Reagan from Colorado Springs for always reaching out to us with questions after each episode. So thank you, Reagan.
We love it when our audience engages with us, and some of the episodes that we've done and that we're recording later today even are coming from questions that Reagan has asked us. So thank you for engaging with us, and keep it up. Mm-hmm. Who's got the weights wisdom? That would be me. All right. So the weights wisdom of the week is to try descending sets instead of ascending sets. So most people, when they're in the gym doing their first couple compound lifts for their workout, it's common for people when they're doing their squat at the beginning of the workout to work up and do sets from, say, like 225, 285, 335 when they're working up to their top sets, their working sets. But what you can do is you can front load the heaviest sets at the beginning. Obviously, you want to warm up a bit, but with ascending sets, the problem is some people will get tired and then they won't be able to push as hard on their top or working sets because they've already fatigued a little bit. So what you can do is you can put your heaviest sets at the beginning, just do a couple warm-up sets, and then do your heaviest sets right away, and then add volume on the back end of that. So what that would look like is for bench, if you're trying to get above 225 and you've just been stuck at 225, you could do your 3 sets of 225 and then back down to 185 and do more reps, and then 155 and do more reps. That's what descending sets would look like. Most people do ascending, but it's always good to mix it up if you're plateaued.
Yeah, so when you're advising that, what kind of warm-up would you advise? Because like if I'm doing the ascending sets, it's usually like 15, 10, 8, 5, and then I go into like 3s and 2s if I'm trying to build power. But I feel like it's going to be the same effect because, at least in my experience, jumping too much weight, like if I went from a set that I'm going to do 15 reps at, or like even 10 reps, but I'm just a lightweight to get the joints oriented and like, not fatigue myself, if that's what we're concerned about. How do we like...
So a way you could structure your warm-up would be, like if you're doing your mobility warm-up at the beginning, do that. And then you can do a CNS primer for your central nervous system. So you could do some explosive movement like med ball throws, where you're really getting your central nervous system to exert a lot of force at once. But it's not like you're squatting 300, right? And then do your warm-up set at 60% or whatever you're doing, whatever you like to do. And then do another set closer. So if normally your warm-up, let's just pick bench for someone at 225. Maybe they do a set of 10 at 135, and then they do another set of 10 at 185, and then they do their 5x5 at 225, right? So what that person could do is they could do their mobility, their med ball throws, whatever shoulder warm-up they're doing, and then they could do 5 reps at 135, just shorten that a little bit, and then do like 2 reps at 205 or 3 reps at 205. So you're really not doing any like full sets. You're just doing a little bit, so you are feeling that weight under the bar, right? Instead of jumping right from 135 to 225 so that it's a full descent, you could do just like a couple reps so that you have felt the weight, a single or a double or a triple at a weight that's just under your top weight.
That makes sense.
And then you are getting that descending effect, and you're not exerting yourself much before you're doing that top weight. It's a different way to organize it. It's nowhere near as common as like the ascending method.
Okay. Well, as speaking of things that are common, the New York Post is claiming that they're going to release the names of those people on the Epstein list. It's very common that they claim it.
We've been waiting how many years? When was
been-
Epstein arrested and suicided?
Gosh, what was that? Beginning
I
of
don't
2020?
I feel like it was before COVID.
It was.
So what, like 4 years ago?
2019,
4 or 5 years
2018?
ago?
Yeah, it's been a minute.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
Was it in college when
We were definitely
when we were still
yeah.
in college?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
So that was probably over 4 years ago.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And the only person that I'm aware of has been Ghislaine.
Yeah.
And
And then everyone thought the lists were going to be released.
All the
Yeah.
names
Elaine
were
went
blacked
to
out.
prison. Yeah, there's nothing. It's all redacted. So
I mean, what does that tell you? You know, it's pretty much anyone that is a household name is
Yeah.
probably on that list.
Nick, did you say
It's all,
that
it's all
there's?
conjecture, but you know.
Did you say, Nick, that there's odds for?
Oh,
who's
there
on the
are.
list?
Yeah, there are like sports book odds.
Yeah.
So I think like Hillary, Trump, and one other person, I forget who it was, are all plus 300.
Because people know that they've been on
So,
the flights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bill Gates is probably like up there as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Who do you think are some sleepers
Some sleepers.
to be on the list?
Ooh.
I mean,
You don't want to accuse
Yeah.
anyone.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah,
I
I-
can't really talk about that.
I would guess some like actors, actresses that people
sure.
wouldn't expect,
Yeah.
or like singers.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I feel like some financial people,
They're
like
kinda-
not specifically BlackRock, but maybe people who are high up at places like
Oh,
that,
yeah.
I could see definitely being on the list. And then, yeah, definitely actors, actresses, maybe some top media anchors.
Do you
I
think
don't know.
there's any possibility that they filter the list when they release it?
Like,
Like-
change it but not redact it so you don't know it's changed.
Well, so like, let's say they get the whole list and it's like cleared for publication, but let's say only one publication gets it and they selectively choose which names are going to be on the list that they publish.
If you're doing like pictures of documents, I feel like it's harder
Yeah.
to do that.
That's true.
If it's just one source that's typing up a list of names, then yeah, you
Yeah.
can say whatever you want. You can say, oh, Sean
Like,
Doyle.
Ted Rohr,
Sean Doyle.
at the age of 17, was on the Lolita Express. I was a victim. I'm joking.
What do you guys think like the repercussions are going to be for people who are on the list? Like, is this
Nothing.
going to be one of those things where just nothing happens and people kind of just go on as usual? Because there's
I mean, because
the deniability aspect of like, oh, I just went there and like
well, also
I
if,
didn't know that was going on.
if someone was
or
on the
anything like
flight
that.
logs, that doesn't mean necessarily they went to the island, right?
Yeah.
They could have been on the flight logs for the plane going to a different place because Epstein did business with a lot of people, and most people that have private jets will like fly people to places, but doesn't mean they specifically went to the island.
Well, it'd probably have like the destination along with the flight log, I would imagine.
That's
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
So are they going to release everyone who was ever on the plane, or just people that went to the island? I guess we're just gonna have to wait and see.
to be seen.
Wait
I mean,
and
it's
see.
supposed to be. It's so this is the 31st, and it's supposed to come out in like the next couple days because
Yeah,
it was
And-
2 weeks from the
And
19th.
JFK's assassination documents were supposed to be released like when?
I don't know.
30 years ago. Still not getting anything.
So-
I don't think we're ever gonna find out. Honestly,
don't.
I think it's like the JFK assassination. They're just
Yeah.
never gonna.
They're gonna wait.
Everyone involved will be dead, and they still won't release.
They're
it.
gonna wait until like Epstein is an equivalent name to like MK Ultra or something. It's something that the general populace just believes is like some sort of weird like conspiracy theory that didn't actually happen, and you know that would never happen. And so in 50 years they might release something when everyone's dead.
Yeah.
But
Remember, kids. They only call it a conspiracy theory if it's true.
that's true. That's true.
All right, what have we? Oh, there's a billboard here in Charleston that Sean and I drove
Speaking of
past yesterday.
conspiracy
Yeah,
theories.
speaking of conspiracies, there's a billboard on the side of the highway here in Charleston as you're entering downtown. It's a bunch of sheep across the billboard with like one sheep cut out in the front that's like above just the rectangle. and there's just big block letters that say "Follow the herd." We'll post the picture.
It says "Join the herd."
Join the herd. Yeah, join the herd.
Yeah.
Join the herd, and we'll post the picture if you're watching. But we were trying to figure out what could this possibly be an ad for, because there's nothing on it that says like a website or a company. There's the only thing is join the herd and a period, and just a bunch of sheep.
Yeah.
So we're trying to figure out what it could be.
I mean, we did some Googling, and the only thing in South Carolina that has that even as like a motto or anything, it's some sort of beef union.
Yeah, but this is
But
sheep,
it's,
not
I mean,
cattle, so.
maybe it's like a Chick-fil-A type,
But it didn't.
joke.
It was not a Chick-fil-A type of ad.
but
Like,
it doesn't make any sense. Yeah.
Could
Yeah,
it be like a herd immunity type thing?
so that's what my first guess was.
But I mean, I would think Pfizer would have their name on there.
Yeah, like there's going to be some sort of branding, like get it at your local Walgreens.
Well, that's the thing. There's
Yeah.
zero
Yeah.
branding on it, so it's impossible for this ad to drive revenue. What's the point of an ad to drive revenue? So, like, who would pay for this billboard to go up with no way to drive revenue?
A bored eccentric millionaire.
I mean, like, honestly, like, there's
Someone who's trying to confuse or just mess with people.
So I immediately thought it was referring to like sheeple and making fun. I thought it was like trolling sheeple.
Yeah.
But what did Madison say?
Oh gosh.
Sean's wife was saying it must be something about Christianity. Like,
Oh yeah, like you know, like the biblical reference to like the, you know, he'll come at the second coming and he'll sort the sheep from the goats. So it is a possibility that it's like
churches are famous for putting up ads that
just don't make sense.
either make no sense or accidentally contain something that's like very.
They didn't intend.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, if you know what that billboard is referring to, please let us know.
Yeah,
please reach out to us.
We are very confused, dazed and confused in Charleston. Yeah. But if we want to move on into the wealth topic. So, disclaimer, as always stated, I have really no qualifications to speak about any of this.
But you did minor in econ, so you got something there.
Yeah, but, you know, credentialism is not something to hang your hat on. It's just simply a topic. I'm going to do my best to avoid any speculation or opinion spouting. So the topic is simply just like currency, kind of dollar price manipulation, currency exchanges, why countries devalue their currency and the effect that has at home generally. So as we all know, you know, the dollar is a fiat currency. That means it's backed by nothing really other than like the guns and the natural resources of the country that is controlling that. And the reason that the dollar is the world reserve currency is because the U.S. is the world superpower. Mm-hmm. You know, like if the U.S. says to do something, you know, pretty much every other country is going to fall in line unless there's a serious coalition that's aligned against it.
Yeah.
And that's excluding, of course, like rogue states, like, you know, North Korea and Iran. They really don't care. They're completely decoupled from the dollar, from the SWIFT system, from pretty much anything that could be affected by our fiscal policies.
The SWIFT is the banking system that most countries in the world use. So during the outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine war, it was a big deal in the news that the U.S. and the UN and everyone was kicking Russia out of the SWIFT. They couldn't use the banking that the rest of the world was using.
Yeah.
Oh, is that how they froze like all the oligarchs' accounts? Pretty much.
They can do that independently, just through legal means. But it's like more of like the actual transfer of value, from what I understand. Like, because if you were, let's say you had, you know, a bank account in the Bank of London and you're a Russian oligarch, like you could probably pay someone off to like still transfer you that stuff. But if they literally cut off like every single bank account that is connected to these guys or in Russia, then like it makes the transfer of money impossible, because really all the transferring money is now It's just changing like zeros on someone's account. Like they're not actually moving like $10 from Ted Rohr's account into his savings account. They're just changing the numbers because there's a 0% reserve requirement in the U.S. banking system, so they don't have to have any of your money.
I thought it's not 10.
No,
Well, so
it was
traditionally in
It was-
economics,
it was
you
10.
can correct me on this, but the power of money is where you need to have 10% of whatever money is deposited. You need to retain that, and then you can invest or loan out the rest. But that
changed with COVID.
exponentially also, when you keep loaning out money, that 10% gets smaller and smaller. Is that correct? Is that the power of money?
Similar,
Is that the
Yeah, but I mean, like it still hits a finite point. Like if you don't have to have any reserve dollars, I would think, it's infinite. The money supply would be infinite.
It's very bad practice, but it was changed right before COVID so that there is no reserve requirement.
Okay.
And they also removed, like, remember how you used to get penalized for taking money out of your savings, or not penalized, but like there was only a certain amount of times per year that you could remove money from your savings account.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it used to be
That's like a bank-to-bank policy, isn't it, though? Or
I think there
but,
might have
most
been
had
some
limits.
Yeah, but either way, they removed that entire requirement as well. So it essentially turned every single savings account into a checking account. So there's no difference, other than maybe like a small interest rate. But yeah, and then they also pretty much erased the reserve requirement, which I don't know if they've changed it back. I haven't seen anything about them changing it back because it's generally something that goes under the radar. Like I only found out about them taking away the reserve requirement like a month or two later. So that's not something that most people report on because it's something that most people don't really understand or care about. It doesn't necessarily affect their day-to-day lives. But more dollars in circulations means your dollars are worth less. And it goes on the global stage as well. Like when Russia or Brazil or any country like that that's holding dollars as reserve currency to like bolster their own, when they sell them, they're driving down the global purchasing power of the dollar. Okay. They're flooding the market. It's just basic, like every basic rule of economics that you can think of with supply and demand also applies in currency markets. And so countries will generally do that, excuse me, as like a way of lowering the pain of paying sovereign debt. And we have a lot of debt. So it doesn't surprise me that, generally the U.S. likes to do
What are you giggling about over there?
We both got these cranes, and then Sean's just holding
Yeah. I'm poor. But yeah, so it factors into like sovereign debt, export, import, pricing and stuff like that. Like if a country wants to reduce the cost of their exports, they'll generally devalue their currency so that they have an advantage. So that, foreign capital sees that their currency is weak, which means that, let's say, that's what China did, for example. There was a couple studies that came out like in the 90s and stuff, that China was essentially intentionally devaluing their currency in order to attract U.S. investors. And that's when we saw a lot of our industry lift up and leave and go to China because they were deliberately weakening the yuan in order so that American, companies would see like, oh, I can get essentially 2 for 1 in China rather than get a 1 for 1 in Ohio. So of course I'm going to go move my Ford plant to Beijing. It's smart on their part, but sucks for, guys from Pennsylvania and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, there's plenty of reasons why countries do that, but generally, like the effect at home is going to be generally inflation, and inflation has been a perennial problem for the U.S. We don't need to get into the hows or the whys of how the CPI is calculated the way it is, but just know that when the CPI is being reported, it's a completely arbitrary number. Like they just pick and choose what they put in the basket. So there's absolutely no, like, there used to be housing in it. There used to be
I was gonna
oil
say,
in it.
because like I've seen people report on like inflation numbers like that, and they're like, yeah, that's everything except for food, housing, cars, and
The only things
electricity.
that
Like, like what are you in
Housing,
there?
cars, electricity, everything you pay for.
Yeah,
Yeah. CPI is Consumer Price Index for our listeners that were not following that, but yeah.
Yeah, so like it's ironic. Like they I think they first changed it in like the late 60s. It was under Nixon when they removed housing, and they just changed the like whatever like basket it is again in 2020. So when they say like, oh, like relative to, you know, this time, like inflation is this rate, like personally and in my unprofessional opinion, I usually add at least 5%, if not more, to whatever the reported CPI is, because that's
like
the
percentage
real,
points, or
yes, no, like percentages. Like if they say 3%, I'm saying it's 8%.
okay.
Because just the simple fact that they can change and swap out into the CPI calculation whatever variables they want in order to make it look better or worse.
Yeah.
They're always going to go for making it look better, you know, therefore reducing panic in the market and like more stability. So I generally, you know, Murphy's Law, like you just got to stick to it. So it's a really impossible way of like managing an economy when everybody's working off fake data.
Yeah.
You know, so it's why economics in some ways is a flawed science.
I mean, it's a social science, really,
Yeah.
more than it
Yeah.
is a hard science.
Yeah.
I've always thought that, especially with unemployment statistics, it's like, okay, but these are not real stats because they're picking and choosing who they want to be in the workforce at any given time.
Yeah.
And like, even though someone might be unemployed, they could just be out of the workforce if they haven't had a job in a year, or if they just gave up looking for a job, but they should be employed. Like, they have all these ways to take people out of the workforce that should be calculated in it.
Yeah. And there was also that growing movement of like the overemployment. Have you guys heard about that? Like
Having multiple
people
jobs.
working 2 jobs at the same time, and yeah.
Yeah, like how do you even factor
So-
that in? You know, if you said
I mean, I
that
don't
there
know
was-
if you can, because like people don't come out and say that because they're hiding it from their employers, most likely.
Yeah, I mean, if
And
you
so-
said that we added 100,000 new jobs this month, but they were all McDonald's fry cooks and they were all single moms that are picking that up after their Subway shift
Yeah.
or, you know, their time at the steel mill or
Yeah, we're like
at
two
maybe-
guys working for the DOD and a guy working as an accountant, and then they pick up an extra job as podcasts. Like,
Yeah.
It's really impossible to like actually get an accurate reading on that. So you know, I guess be wary of any statistic pushed out.
So
And
how
always look
are
at how they
these
calculate it.
How are these things that you're talking about impacting how the dollar is essentially being stolen from people?
Well, so I mean, the dollar has lost over 90% of its purchasing power since the inception of the Federal Reserve.
In 19
13, I want to say.
13, okay.
Yeah, it was like right before World War
Yeah.
One. And Woodrow Wilson was the president, and
worst president of all time.
Yeah, he wasn't my favorite. I'll say that. But he, like, there were a lot of manipulations and like crazy things that were going on, and like I've, you know, spoken to several people on either side of the issue. There are some pretty hardcore people that think that the amendment that created the Federal Reserve is invalid because of certain constitutional procedures. Other ones argue that regardless of the status, they would argue that it was entirely valid and like all above board, and that, you know, entering the 21st century when fiat currency was really becoming a thing, it was important that the U.S. had the ability to engage in currency wars, like what happened to us with China. We lost that because we just didn't really pay attention. And if you have a gold-backed currency, you can't really manipulate, you know, the international market in the same way. Like you can't buy back.
There'll be a lot of people that are just like, "Oh, the Fed is horrible. It's all evil." But
Yeah, like
like
they're-
everything else has its pros and its cons.
Yeah.
So whenever you're listening to someone and they're just like, "Oh, the Fed is the worst," or "The Fed is the best," and
Yeah.
it's only all good or all bad, it's like, no, like it's good and bad. Like over time, we're losing the value of the dollar, but it also allows us to manipulate interest rates to help grow the economy artificially. So it depends.
So it's like there's the geopolitical and economic benefits and losses of each. Like I think I read somewhere, don't remember where, won't cite my source, that the dollar like maintained its purchasing power for I think over 80 years. Like it did not change, and that was when we were without a central bank. But obviously the economy was probably growing far slower.
Yeah,
so it's one of those things that you really have to get down to brass tacks about. There's no definitive answer, but I personally would prefer having a dollar that was redeemable for something other than a McChicken. I think there's that argument that when Burger King came out with like these little tokens that you could turn in for a Big Mac, like they were actually more economically valuable than a dollar because there was something backing it.
Oh, because you can always buy a Big Mac. It doesn't matter if it costs $5 or $10.
Yeah, you'll always be able to get it for that exchange rate. Yeah, no, it was funny, but that's.
I'm no fast food expert, but I'm pretty sure Burger King wouldn't give you a Big Mac for a token.
No, it was like a promotion. My bad. It's all the same. It's all the same. But yeah, I mean that unless you guys have like some more comments and stuff like that kind of ends my spiel on what currency manipulation is and how it affects us.
Well, could you kind of explain what the Fed is, or like who owns it, how many there are, like the structure of the whole thing?
So there's the U.S. Central Reserve Bank, which is the Fed. It's a privately owned bank. It's not a government entity. There is some government oversight. I believe the president has to be approved by the executive branch. But it is privately owned, and I believe around 40% of it is owned by Citibank. So think of most private banks in the U.S. own some percentage of the Fed, and they generally decide the board of governors. And there's a federal reserve bank in every single state, or not every single state, but there are several throughout the U.S. that kind of manage regional.
I forget.
I think there's like 13 of them, or I want to say 13.
13 board members and 7 are voting. Is that correct?
Yeah. But it's generally it's not like there's one in every single state, and it's not like you can go there as an individual and take out a loan from the Fed. Like they're like the banker's bank
to set monetary policy for the banks.
Yeah. So they determine interest rates, and that runs downhill to you when the Fed raises interest rates. Well, your local bank is going to have to raise its interest rate because the only way that they'll make money is charging a higher interest rate than the money that they're getting from the Fed, which is on loan to them. So it's this whole complicated flow of money from the top down and money coming in from the bottom, and how they manage that flow of assets.
Yeah, and I think there are some limits on the profits that the central bank can take. Do you know anything about that? Because I mean they literally can print their own money and then lend it out at an interest rate. Like it
sounds like a sick business model.
Yeah,
yeah. There's something like the U.S. Treasury has a relationship with them where they'll buy treasury bonds, which is effectively a loan to the Treasury Department, which can then use that to pay off sovereign debt. So there's some interaction between them and the federal government, but I don't remember if there's specifically a significant amount of checks and balances. I mean, you really just have to hope that the Fed chairman's a pretty smart dude.
That they don't artificially hold a zero interest rate policy over the course of a decade or something like that, right?
Yeah, that would be
that wouldn't be good.
This is
that would have some consequences. Should we move on to some dirt talk, some soil?
Yeah, let's talk about the dirt. Dollars and dirt, baby. Dollars and dirt.
All right, so The reason that soil is important is that your micronutrients in your food comes from the soil, from the ground. So one of the issues with conventional farming is that it strips the soil of its nutrients. And then over time, the food that is grown has less and less vitamins and minerals in it for the same amount of food. So if you have an ear of corn from 1910 and an ear of corn from 2010, and they're the same size, the one from 1910 in many cases would have higher amounts of vitamins and minerals in it than the one from 2010, 100 years later, because the soil has been stripped of a lot of micronutrients. There's many reasons this happens. One of them is monocropping, which we talked about in a recent episode. Monocropping is where you have one crop that in an entire field. When you have variety of crops, they each pull different amounts of nutrients from the soil, and it helps the health of the soil. Another thing, this has been growing a lot with regenerative agriculture, like white oak pastures or polyface farms or other farms. But when you have animals in a natural environment and they walk around and they poop and they're walking around and moving the dirt with their hooves, what it does is it does a couple things. It sequesters carbon in the earth, so you get more CO2 being absorbed and held in the earth, which would reduce CO2 in the air. And then it also helps the roots get deeper. And when the roots get deeper, the soil right under the surface is more porous, and then more water is able to be retained in the earth. So you don't have water just running off the top. There's a really cool video that White Oak Pastures did where they have their farm and a neighboring farm that does conventional farming, and both farms are running into this river. There's rain, and the conventional farming farm, you can see in the river where it's just all brown, cloudy water. And then on White Oak Pastures side, the water coming into the river is clear. And it's because on the conventional farming side, all that topsoil is just being run off right into the river. So you're losing soil, and the water isn't going into the ground, and then the soil has less nutrients in it, and you've lost topsoil. If you learned about like the Dust Bowl in the 1900s in elementary or middle school history, this is a result of monocropping and not having plants and animals live in harmony, right? So over time, we lose micronutrients. And you guys have any questions about that deeper?
Does this affect macronutrients or just micros?
So,
like, is there more protein in an old chicken? Or like,
it's hard.
You know what I mean?
So I did come across something that showed that there's more micronutrients in the animals of old, because with conventional farming now, like if you look at the size of a chicken in 1910 and a chicken today, they're monsters today. The chicken breast is like 3 times the size, right? So, and then also the chickens are brought to scale much faster. So instead of taking 6 months for the broilers, it takes 40 days.
Yeah.
And over that time, they're growing faster, but they're not gaining as many nutrients as they're putting on that muscle. So I don't have numbers exactly for that, because there's like a study done in Britain, but it looked like there might have been error with like when they were measuring it, how much moisture was in the meat. So I didn't put the numbers down because it just looked like there were some errors, and I didn't want to give numbers from a bad study. But we do have numbers from a study that the USDA did, so we can go into those a little bit.
Okay.
So there's not a direct relationship between the yield of a crop and the quality of a crop, but as I was saying, just like with the chickens, same thing for plants. Like as you rapidly increase yield and how fast something's growing, you're losing the amount of micronutrients or the quality of that food, because you just can't suck up as many nutrients from the roots if so much more is being grown. And compared to like the 1940s, today we have 3 times as much corn being grown on 1 acre. So we're growing a lot more. It's just not as nutritious. As far as the numbers go, so the USDA looked at 43 different vegetables and in 1950 and 1999. So over that 50-year time period, on average for all the vegetables, calcium dropped by 16%, phosphorus dropped by 9%, iron dropped by 15%, vitamin A dropped by 18%, vitamin B2 dropped by 38%, and vitamin C dropped by 15%. So there's a noticeable decline on average in all the vegetables micronutrients. So
Did any increase?
no, there weren't. I didn't see any increases. We'll attach the study. It's on table 3 is the table I pulled the statistics from, but I'll attach that study here if you're watching. So the problem is, like, even with people that are trying to have a nutrient-rich diet and they're eating whole foods, they're eating fruits and vegetables, getting their servings in, well, you might be trying to eat those whole foods, but they're less nutritious than they used to be.
Yeah.
So this is how people are being robbed of their micronutrients. But I also wonder if like the fruits and vegetables that people were eating were smaller and more historical size before
They were.
the conventional. Yeah, like the fruits and vegetables used to be smaller, just like the chickens, right?
Yeah.
But I wonder if people would eat more fruits and vegetables if they were the ones that we used to have, if they were more flavorful and if they had more nutrients in them. Because if you're eating a food that's full of nutrients, you're probably going to feel better, and maybe people would subconsciously notice that difference. I mean, it's not a huge difference where maybe someone would notice it right away, but I mean, if you're eating an orange that's got 30% more vitamin C in it, like, do you notice that when you eat it? I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, there's like, I mean, I got a baby on the way, and I have 5 nieces and nephews, and my sisters are all like very crunchy moms, and I think from one of them I heard about this thing called like intuitive eating with like, I think toddlers, and if as long as there's like no processed sugared foods in the house, so like as long as there's no like chocolate and Rice Krispie treats and ice cream and Swedish fish, like candy and stuff, they will eat what their body needs. Like if you give them a plate of like meat, vegetables, fruits, they might not eat any of this particular vegetable because their body's like good on iron, but they might eat all the oranges that you will give them all day.
Yeah.
Every day until they like max out their vitamin C capacity, and then they won't eat oranges for like a week.
Yeah, with pregnancy, the like pregnant mothers have that on steroids. They'll just develop intense cravings for like pickles if they're low on electrolytes, or oranges if they're low on vitamin C. Like, it's a real thing, and it's definitely like a superpower that's been suppressed in people because they're eating garbage that's engineered to make them eat more of that specific thing. Like,
maximize satiety or something. Yeah.
Like, the difference between how sweet a sweet potato or an apple is when you're eating a whole food diet compared to when you're eating whole foods and processed foods is absolutely night and day. Like, it just tastes so much better when your body or your like tongue isn't used to such over-engineered, artificially sweet and savory foods.
Except for Gushers. We love Gushers. I do. No.
I haven't had a Gusher in I don't know how long.
So good.
Yeah, we weren't allowed to eat those growing up.
I had like an entire pack like 2 weeks ago. Probably the happiest I've been.
When you were in Ranger, did you develop any intense cravings for like certain foods?
Steak.
I was so like I would do anything for a steak in Ranger school, and I think it's because we were lacking protein in pretty much every micronutrient.
Yeah,
like,
it was just I wanted meat.
Yeah.
And there was, but other than that, it wasn't really like a food craving. I really wanted beer. I wanted beer and meat. I wanted like a 50-gallon tub of delicious beer.
Just bathe in it and drink it. Yeah.
Did that honey bun thing happen to you too? That
okay, so yes, we talked about this before. So I've talked before about how like now I have this intense craving for honey buns if I ever walk into a gas station and see honey buns, because during Ranger when we were starving, they would sometimes give us honey buns. Anytime there was dog X, honey buns, or like there was one time where in the middle of the night they just gave us a box of honey buns and we were starving. We devoured them, but like because of that, my brain attached honey buns with like sustaining life and sugar and energy. So like did that happen to you, the honey buns?
No,
I know it's happened to other guys too.
I mean not with honey buns, but like I think I actually went through all of school without ever eating a honey bun.
What?
Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah, I never, they don't appeal to me.
Yeah.
I think I might have tried one at some point and knew I kind of didn't like it.
Yeah.
But there was this one time that it was, the Golden Walk type thing, but the guy forgot his like treat for us, essentially. I mean, Ranger School, you're kind of like dogs. You like get treats if you're good. And we did good. So we got treats and they were zebra cakes. And I had like just finished my fire watch shift. It's in mountains, and so you get sleep 45 minutes that night. So I took my 5-minute shift, and then I went and got into my sleep sack, and apparently about 15 minutes later he got back with the zebra cakes. And you're sleeping in your sleeping bag because it's cold, but my face is exposed, and I remember passed out and then being woken up, and there's just the red cyclops, and then something is just shoved into my mouth. And it was like this moment of intense bliss and like deliciousness, and then I passed right back out. I don't know how I didn't choke to death on it. Like this guy stuffed an entire zebra cake into my mouth, and then just left me, and I immediately passed out again.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I mean, that similar though, like in Ranger, the sugar, like all the candy in the MREs is like what you go for because it's just that quick energy. So, like our bodies definitely do have an innate sense of what they need, and
100%.
The best way to feel that is to be on a whole food diet where you're not getting hit with these artificial signals from engineered foods. But back to soil. This is insane. All right, we need
back
good
to
soil.
Dirt, Ted Dirt.
Do you know of any countries that farm differently, like don't monocrop, or is this across the world?
I mean, it's just profits, like big ag, big
food. Ag, man.
Yeah,
big whey, big soda, big ag.
But
Big Ted.
Monocropping is huge, especially
if it goes on the micronutrients.
Especially with the way that the whole plant-based thing has been invading our culture. Monocrop for like soy and corn is just so big. So like even in the Amazon, they're burning down large parts of the rainforest to monocrop soy there. Like it's just expanding. It's getting worse around the world, I would say. Like I'm not sure if there is a place. I do know that there are some countries that are exclusively like grass-fed farming, pretty much. So New Zealand, Australia, they do all grass-fed, which is why if you get butcher box or something, it's usually from Australia or New Zealand.
Gotcha.
And then there are also some countries that don't allow GMOs. Italy and Russia, they don't allow GMOs, right? So
it's probably what the Russia-Ukraine war is actually about.
Yeah.
GMOs.
Would make sense. But if you have any questions about micronutrients, I guess, this is something we've been hitting a lot lately, so we'll get off of micronutrients for the foreseeable future because we've been hitting that pretty hard for the last 5 episodes. But if you're interested to learn more, we've mentioned before, micronutrients part 1 and 2, vitamins, and then minerals was back around episode 25, 26. So scroll down and you can find those. And we will see you guys next week.
Hit it up, give it a listen.
Thanks for joining us today at Weights and Wealth, and don't forget to apply today's lessons to live healthy and wealthy.
If this conversation will contribute to your fitness and financial gains, please share it with a friend or family member and give a 5-star review so more people can lift bigger weights and get bigger bank accounts.